What if I told you that 400 years ago, Europe experienced a financial meltdown so devastating it makes modern inflation look tame, and the playbook used then is being repeated today? Welcome to Timeless Finance. Today, I am inviting you to explore the Kipper and Wipper crisis, a forgotten currency collapse from 1620s Germany that mirrors exactly how governments devalue money in our time. But first, I have a quick question for you. Comment down below and tell me, what country are you in and what time is it for you right now? I am really interested in seeing just how global our community is. Now let us get into it. In the early 1600s, Europe experienced something eerily familiar. A financial meltdown driven by greed, manipulation, and the silent theft of value. It was called the Kipper and Wipper crisis, which translates roughly to clipping and culling time. This forgotten disaster from 1620s Germany was one of the first major currency collapses in history, and it holds a mirror to the way money is being devalued today. Let us set the stage. Europe, early 17th century. The continent is in chaos. The 30 Years' War has just erupted, one of the most devastating conflicts in European history. Armies are marching, cities are burning, and kings are scrambling to pay for war. But wars are expensive. Gunpowder, soldiers, horses, supplies, everything costs money. And when governments run out of silver and gold, they start getting creative. The Holy Roman Empire, which covered much of Central Europe, was not a single country. It was a patchwork of hundreds of states, duchies, and free cities. Each had its own ruler, its own economy, and crucially, its own mint. The emperor technically had authority over the monetary system, but in practice, everyone was making their own coins. This created the perfect setup for disaster. Here is where it starts to unravel. Rulers began to debase their coins, meaning they started mixing cheaper metals like copper and tin into their silver coins while keeping the face value the same. Imagine you take a 1-ounce silver coin, melt it down, and make 3 coins out of the same silver, filling the rest with junk metal. Now you have tripled your money supply without producing any more real wealth. And because everyone else was doing it, a race to the bottom began. Each state tried to outdo the others to finance their wars and pay their soldiers. Soon coins that looked silver on the outside were basically copper underneath. People started noticing. Prices went up, trust went down, and markets began to crumble. Sound familiar? This period became known as the Kipper and Wipper crisis. The names referred to the people and scales used to cheat the system, literally clipping bits of silver off coins or using rigged scales to swap good coins for bad ones. It was an early version of inflation before central banks, before paper money, before digital currencies. It showed how human greed could destroy the value of money itself. Merchants quickly caught on. They began refusing the debased coins. Some cities banned certain currencies altogether. The economy fragmented. In some areas, people reverted to bartering or using foreign coins from more stable regions like the Netherlands. The chaos was not just financial. It fueled political unrest and violence, adding another layer of misery to a continent already ravaged by war. What is fascinating and a bit terrifying is that the people responsible for this monetary disaster did not see themselves as villains. They believed they were just doing what was necessary. After all, their armies needed payment. Their fortresses needed supplies. But every time they pressed a new batch of coins, they quietly robbed their citizens, not through taxation, but through inflation. The collapse did not stop at inflation. It spiraled into full-blown monetary collapse. Soldiers who were paid in worthless coins began looting the countryside to survive. Farmers refused to sell food for debased money. Cities starved. Trade routes broke down. And soon, famine and disease followed, killing more people than the war itself. In essence, a bad monetary system became a weapon of mass destruction. But the real story was not just about economics. It was about psychology, propaganda, and the extraordinary lengths rulers will go to hide a financial lie. The people running the debasement schemes were not stupid. They knew the danger of openly admitting they were creating fake money. So they disguised it. They called it monetary reform, war necessity, or even temporary stabilization. In reality, they were systematically stealing value from their own citizens. To make it worse, the rulers did not act alone. They hired private entrepreneurs known as mintmasters, outsourced money producers who would profit from the chaos. These mintmasters operated like shadow bankers. They would receive the rights to strike coins for a territory, mix in more base metal than authorized, and share the profits with the ruler. Everyone in the chain had an incentive to keep debasing. The people at the top called it innovation. The people at the bottom called it starvation. And just like modern times, when citizens began to suspect something was wrong, officials turned to distraction and scapegoats. Pamphlets appeared blaming foreign coin clippers or dishonest merchants. In one region, authorities even claimed witches were using sorcery to make silver disappear. That is right. When the monetary system failed, they literally blamed magic. If that sounds absurd, remember that every era invents its own excuses. Today we might hear that supply chain issues, temporary inflation, or necessary stimulus are to blame when currencies lose value. It is the same theater rewritten for a new century. Now imagine being an ordinary citizen in 1622. You wake up, go to market, and realize the price of bread has doubled again. The coins in your pocket feel lighter. Shopkeepers are inspecting every piece, refusing the ones that sound dull when dropped on the counter. There is panic in the air, but no one fully understands what is happening. This is where the deeper tragedy sets in. The people least responsible for the crisis, peasants, laborers, small merchants, suffered the most. Their wages could not keep up with exploding prices. Meanwhile, those with power, nobles, generals, and speculators, found ways to profit. They would borrow money in debased coins and repay in even cheaper ones, effectively erasing their debts. Inflation became a transfer of wealth from the powerless to the powerful. Let us connect this to modern systems. Today, when central banks expand the money supply through quantitative easing or low interest rates, asset prices rise. Stocks, real estate, commodities. But who owns the majority of those assets? The wealthy. Meanwhile, ordinary people see higher living costs without proportional wage growth. That is why even 400 years later, the ghost of Kipper and Wipper haunts every stimulus package or monetary experiment. When the inflation became unbearable, rulers did not admit their policies caused it. Instead, they outlawed bad coins, set new price controls, and forced people to accept worthless money under penalty of death. It was economic coercion dressed as reform. Some rulers even went further. They reissued new coins at a supposedly honest silver content, but taxed the exchange at confiscatory rates. If you wanted to trade your old coins for new ones, you lost half your money in the process. It was a reset engineered to wipe out private wealth while keeping government solvent. By 1623, the devastation was total. Farmers burned their crops rather than sell for worthless money. Soldiers deserted en masse. Entire cities depopulated. And yet, as unbelievable as it sounds, there was no single event marking the end of the Kipper and Wipper crisis. It simply faded away. People stopped using the bad money and reverted to trade in silver bullion, foreign coins, or barter. Life limped on, but trust took generations to rebuild. When historians look back on this period, they see more than just economic collapse. They see the birth of monetary awareness. People began to understand that money was not just metal. It was a social contract, a promise. And once a ruler breaks that promise, the cost is measured not in coins, but in human suffering. Out of this destruction came the blueprint for modern monetary control. European rulers realized they could no longer allow private mints and regional authorities to control money. So they began to centralize coinage under state control. This shift marked the slow birth of what we now recognize as central banking, a monopoly on money creation. But the real motivation was not stability. It was power. Whoever controlled the issuance of money controlled the empire itself. Before the Kipper and Wipper crisis, people could see debasement happening. They could feel the lighter coins. They could hear the dull sound when dropped on a table. Today, the same process happens invisibly, not by hammer and furnace, but by keyboard and balance sheet. Central banks create liquidity with digital entries. Inflation does not jingle in your pocket anymore. It hides in your rent, your groceries, your savings account. Here is the haunting twist. Even after the catastrophe, those responsible for Kipper and Wipper were not punished. They were promoted. Many mintmasters used their fortunes to buy land, titles, or even positions in government. The public bore the pain. The elites walked away richer. That is the uncomfortable truth of every monetary crisis. Whether it is 1623 or 2023, the same dynamic repeats. Moral hazard for the powerful, austerity for everyone else. The crisis proved one thing beyond doubt. Money is not a physical thing. It is a shared belief. The Kipper and Wipper crisis showed that once the belief breaks, no amount of metal, paper, or digital code can hold the system together. What sustains value is not government decree. It is collective trust. That trust, once lost, takes generations to rebuild. Now, 4 centuries later, we are living in another version of the same experiment. We no longer clip coins. We print debt. We no longer dilute silver. We dilute savings. The technology changed, but the psychology did not. Governments still borrow beyond their means. Central banks still promise temporary fixes, and ordinary people still pay the price. When you hear leaders today promise to stabilize the economy by creating more money, remember Saxony 1622. Remember the farmers who watched their coins turn to dust. Remember that behind every monetary collapse is the same quiet betrayal, the belief that wealth can be printed without consequence. The Kipper and Wipper crisis was more than an economic disaster. It was a mirror showing humanity's oldest weakness, the desire to create something from nothing, and its oldest lie, that this time will be different. Now I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Do you agree with this? What is your take on whether modern central banks are repeating the mistakes of 1620s Europe? Your perspective really matters to us and helps shape the future of this channel.